Josh, if engineering were a pop-up book, you'd be that page where the main character's been ripped off and replaced with magic marker.
My favorite page. Welcome to Engineer vs. Designer,
The podcast.
Product Design Insights. My name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
And my name is Adam, industrial designer of CADJunkie.com.
This week, we're mixing it up a little bit. You're listening to a special edition EvD.
We are turning off the glowing rectangles for a minute.
And jumping into the centuries-old craft of paper engineering.
That's pop-up books, people.
Yep, and nothing mixes in art and engineering like a pop-up book, am I right?
You are right, Josh.
And this week we have a very special guest with us from his studio in New York City, critically acclaimed children's pop-up book artist and paper engineer, recently featured in Wall Street Journal, Mr. Robert Sabuda.
Robert, it is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yes.
If you could transform Central Park into Jell-O, which flavor would you choose, my friend?
Is mint a flavor of Jell-O? Does that count?
That is my favorite flavor.
I would eat Central Park.
Robert, we will talk more with you in a mere moment, but first, special congratulations to Engineer Nerd for being the first to comment on our last episode. As promised, we have sent him a free EvD t-shirt. Let that be a lesson to ye all. Comment on EvD and good things happen. Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com.
Yes.
Place the book of knowledge on our heads and whack it with the hammer of education. Let's get this party started.
This week's SolidSmack update is brought to you by SolidBox. Rockin' the sweet love and performance out of your solid modeling with rigs that are configured specifically for SolidWorks and Mastercam users. Call them up at 877-697-9269 or visit them at mysolidbox.com. All right. Later in the show, we'll be talking about the process that goes into making pop-up books. But in the 6 minutes and 32 seconds before then, you can check out one that'll pop and twist your perspective all over the place. The MC Escher pop-up book from the paper engineering extravagance of Courtney Watson McCarthy steps you through the famous Dutch artist's graphic work in the dimension it was meant for. It's published by Tamsin Hudson and can be picked up on Amazon for $20.
All right, it's very cool stuff. And in the realm of 3D digital manipulation, there's a new iPad app bringing 3 dimensions of control over your 3D models using a good old iPad. Made Control is a simple desktop software and iPad app combo that links to your 3D software, allowing you to pan, orbit, and zoom your model much like a 3D mouse does, except using your favorite Apple device. It works over Wi-Fi and ad hoc networks, connects to other iPads to allow real-time collaboration, and even gives you control over your keyboard and mouse. This is just nuts. It is currently available for SketchUp and Rhino with support for some other stuff coming down the line.
And since we're talking about pop-up books today, we want to throw cubecraft.com into the mix for anybody who feels inspired at the end of the episode.
I already do.
Me too. Lots of fun stuff to adorn your desk.
Check it out at cubeecraft.com. 2 E's in there.
Adam O'Hearn of CADJunkie.com. Why is there... Oh my... What a mess.
This week we are making pop-up books with acclaimed pop-up book artist Robert Sabuda, who's published dozens of incredible feats of paper engineering, including Beauty and the Beast, Peter Pan, The Chronicles of Narnia, and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, to name a few.
So here at EvD, we're interested in the intersection of engineering and design, of course, and try to bring on guests who straddle those worlds in some way. You most definitely fit that bill. And I understand that you write, illustrate, and engineer your own books. What is the basic process? Where did the ideas come from? What are the next steps? And then how does that somehow finally end up on the gift table at the baby shower?
You know, in some ways, I'm originally from Michigan. My parents are from Detroit, the Motor City. So in some ways, I do actually kind of consider it sort of like designing a car. All the cars have to basically work and function. You know, they have to be able to roll off the assembly line. But there's so many small details and things about designing a car that will affect the ultimate outcome. And on a much more smaller scale, made out of paper, designing a pop-up book is the same way. I start off right from the beginning working out the engineering, which is actually part of the designing as well. You know, in my mind's eye, I have a visual. It's almost like a play. What do I want this book to look like? Or what's the story? What's each scene? What is exciting? Just like in a car. You know, you see a car that doesn't look, you know, very exciting. It's not going to be interesting to you. You're not going to want to get inside. You're not going to want to drive it. And a pop-up book is really the same way. So I just start working on the 3D stuff right from the beginning. Trial and error. I don't use a computer. My brain must be working a mile a minute trying to determine how the paper is going to work. And again, I bring up a car analogy because the paper has different moods, it has different aspects, different weights. And I'm not just working in 3 dimensions. I also work, like a car, with a 4th dimension, which is an element of time. A pop-up page opens within a time frame of a second and a half. Like, what can I make happen in that second and a half? Some pieces will move slower. Some pieces will move faster. So there's all different kinds of sort of physics that I have to sort of hope to understand in the paper.
And it's all got to work together.
And it's all got to work together. You know, it's not so much that it has to pop up. It has to be able to pop shut, you know, over and over and over again.
Very important.
So there's, you know, back to that working part of it, like making it actually happen a lot of different times.
Well, what's so interesting about this is, you know, we talk a lot on this show about the tension between art and engineering and artists and engineers. And based on previous conversations, a lot of people say that they have 2 voices in their head separately. And, you know, if they do both professions, if they both work in engineering and kind of design, then they kind of shut one off while they think about the other. But you're talking about these as kind of a seamless process, it sounds like. So does your inner artist ever fight with the engineer? And if so, you know, how does that fight play out?
Clearly, you are talking to some very crazy people. Oh my God, I've never heard that before. Like, we're talking to people who have different voices. This one's name is Lillian, and this is Sylvia. Lillian and Sylvia, they hate each other. Just kidding. Wow, that was a very interesting perspective. Do I ever have to shut off a section of my mind to, you know, that has never occurred to me. Of course, whether you're an engineer or designer, and any engineer or designer who says they don't have insecurities is not being completely honest with you. We all have our insecurities. So,
well, maybe I'll just clarify, just for your benefit, is, you know, we come from the product design world, consumer products, you know, aerospace, where generally, or, you know, less and less, but still traditionally, designers and engineers are separate professions that are kind of walled off from one another, and more they work together, and sometimes more and more these people, you know, actually can be the same person.
Right.
But, you know, in our industry, they tend to be 2 separate people, and I guess that's where we're coming from.
Okay. Well, then I definitely have the luxury. I come from a background where I went to school. I went to Pratt in Brooklyn. That was not a philosophy. The philosophy there was you are the one-all and the be-all of everything that you create, and you are responsible for all aspects of it. And so I think that coming from that kind of training and background makes me feel like kind of the big boss of everything I do, which ultimately makes me responsible for everything that I do. And so in terms of, you know, I was going to say one more thing too. I do a lot of yoga, and so I think that yoga also just allows my brain in general to set aside any concerns or insecurities I might have about the work that I'm creating and let it all hopefully come together harmoniously. So I don't really, I don't have any of the having to shut off one mind and turn on another. That never really happens with me, thankfully. Although now that you said it does to all these other people, now I'm going to have a complex.
Oh, no.
You'll have to go do some yoga to work that out.
Yeah, totally.
And it started wiggling all over the place.
Okay,
and
Josh,
it just,
it's time for a break.
It was really squirmy.
It's time,
and then
time
it
for a
started
break today,
biting me
Josh.
and gnawing off
Josh,
that little
shut
piece
up,
of
Josh.
skin that
Josh,
hangs there.
oh my God. This week's EvD Special Edition is brought to you by SolidBox, raising the bar on high-performance Dell, Box, and hardcore computers with SolidWorks and Mastercam pre-installed, tuned for optimal performance and ready to rip. View the full array of SolidBox servers, workstations, and laptops at mysolidbox.com. As you know, today we're sitting down with Robert Sabuda, paper engineer and maker of some of the most amazing works of pop-up book engineering I have ever seen in my life.
Now, on this show, we focus a lot on digital design tools, but your process is almost entirely analog, or is entirely analog. Can you talk a little bit about that decision?
You know, I come from, well, for me, this is for me, I'm sure. My father was a carpenter, and his father was a carpenter, and his father was a carpenter. So I come from a line of people who work with their hands kind of in general. And so I like to think that my brain sort of works in a three-dimensional format that way. And it was wonderful when computers came around and I was able to do some of the technical aspect, not the design work, but able to do some of the technical aspect on a computer. Oh, it made life so much easier because I used to have to draw on vellum with technical pens, and it was very laborious, and it took forever. But it was such a nice, refreshing break, you know what I mean, because things went faster that way. I could spend more time on the analog stuff. And there's just really no other way. And I'm sure there are other industries, you know, or other people that you talk to where they say, yes, all this technology is great, but that's kind of the frosting. You know, the meat and the potatoes, I still have to do, you know, by hand. I still have to.
Well, I love that you say that the digital tools have allowed you to spend more time on the analog stuff.
Absolutely.
I love that that way of thinking about
There's
the work.
no doubt, because really when you think about it, and I know people have said this before, and, you know, it's like, oh, you know, yeah, we know that. You know, really a computer, at least for me in my area with what I do, is really only another tool. It's just a tool. It doesn't really, you know, my Mac, I work on Macs because I'm in publishing. My Mac doesn't do any of the design work for me. You know, it just makes my life easier, like electricity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can have the light bulb on at night, but the actual design work still has to come from my brain to my hand using an actual piece of paper. And that's great for me because I love work. I know plenty of people who do not like working with their hands. I have a couple of designers who work for me, and they'll be showing me something on screen, and I'm like, you know, could you just give me a pencil? I need to visualize this on paper. So I'll start to sketch it out to them, and they're like amazed that I'm sketching it out, but that's just how I need to feel it and work it and address it, and my brain will work faster that way than the computer will.
Well, I'll tell you, I do the exact same thing in my work. I do a lot of work. Unlike you, I do a lot of work on the computer, but I do always have, a pen and paper, and even sometimes, you know, some clay, some plasticine clay next to the computer to help me work out forms. It's invaluable.
Yes, because part of what we do as designers, and I think I speak for a lot of designers, is in the beginning, a lot of it is very, I guess, amorphic. You know what I mean? It is like a piece of clay. And the computer to me is very, and at least the way I use it, is very exacting. And in the beginning of my process, I'm not really very exacting. I need to go through a clay moment of making mistakes and making errors and doing stuff quickly, judgment calls, discarding, keeping, adding. That all has to happen away from the exactingness of my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so you live and work in New York, and having been there for a couple of months this summer, I can see why people love it so much. It is an incredibly inspiring place to be and work. Do you think that your physical location is an important component of your creative process?
And there it is.
And there it is. I actually no longer feel that way. You know what? I don't know if I ever felt that way. My work is so self-contained, and so much happens inside my head that it doesn't matter to me whether I'm in Manhattan. I actually have a place up in the Hudson Valley that I go to on the weekends, and I work up there too. It doesn't make a difference to me because I try not to get so caught up in the frenetic aspect of New York City life. I did that when I was much younger, and now I don't want to do that anymore. And so I tell people, listen, if there's a FedEx box, I could live wherever I wanted to, you know, and I'm happy to feel that way. Not like if I felt like I had to be in Manhattan, I think I'd go crazy.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. I mean, so you say you could live wherever you want to, but I mean, there's going to be some choices about where you want to live, and does that not affect the quality of your work? You know, whether or not you live in a place where you enjoy living, whether you've got influences that are important to you, people that are important to you, all those things.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Well, I certainly wouldn't want to live somewhere that I hated, and if I hated where I lived, I think it would affect my work. Absolutely. And in terms of, you know, if I moved away to, I don't know, some remote island in Hawaii, that would obviously be a huge life consideration because, like you said, I'd be far from my family, I'd be far from my friends. But I do know some people who really feel the need to be in New York City to make them function properly. And I don't feel that way. I find when I come back from upstate and I come here to the city, like I'm walking slower on the streets. And I kind of like that because I don't feel like you need to burn through all the creativity in my mind. You know, it's not like, well, I got to be back in the city to light this fire, to get this thing cooking all over again. My creativity just doesn't work that way. You know, it's always there and accessible to me.
Wow. You mentioned working with teams, the guys on the computers. Is collaboration ever difficult? And what kinds of challenges arise from working with a group in a creative project like a pop-up book?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with, and I'm sure both of you will agree with this, even though, you know, I don't know the specifics of how you work. I think a lot of it depends on how secure one is in their own creative life. I think if you're fraught with insecurities, that makes it very difficult to work in a collaborative situation. If you respect the people that you're working with, even if they're your employees, you respect their opinions, things will for the most part always go smooth. And I've been very fortunate in my life to find that has been the case. You know, if I'm going out in left field on something and I turn to one of my designers and I'm like, look at this, isn't this awesome? And they'll be like, that is not great. You know, and I'll be like, oh, man, really? You know, or I just open it up and I expect a big response and I get nothing from them. You know, so then I know that it's up to me to go back and make that right.
Nice.
And part of it also is my two designers are also from where I went to school, so we can speak a little bit of a common language, you know, very open, very direct and to the point. You know, look at something, we'll all discuss it together and try to just find the best way to make something well. You know, my goal here is always to make the best book, the best pop-up that I can make. And it's their job and their responsibility to back me up, not just to yes me, but to also get to the same point. So I don't have any problem with collaboration at all. No.
Is it like an assembly line? You related it to the car industry. Do you take on all the aspects of it, or do you have people set up?
Just the design point. Once I've designed the pop-ups, I finished the final artwork, the color artwork for it. You know, the digital die lines, we make these die lines so all the pieces can be cut out like big cookie cutters, you know, to cut out all these pop-up pieces. After I finish all the design stuff, it goes to the publisher. You know, I have long-standing relationships with a couple publishers. And then all that material is sent overseas now to Thailand, still a little bit of China, for them to cut them out, print them, cut up the pieces, and hand assemble them. And somebody from my studio always goes to oversee that process. But you know, after the design stuff is done, my work here is finished. You know, which is nice because let me tell you, after 8 or 9 or 10 months of working on one book,
wow.
I don't want to see it anymore.
You're ready to be done.
It's not like a baby. You know, after the 9 months, oh my God, this wonderful, awesome thing is here. After 9 months, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. I just got to get this out of my studio. And I'm sure other people feel differently, but that's just me.
Break time.
Fine.
Back in a second. As you know, today we're sitting down with Robert Sabuda, pop-up book artist and paper engineer extraordinaire.
So excited.
So excited. Just ignore the life-size cardboard cutout I've made of you. For now, it's a work in progress, and I'm not obsessed or creepy about it in any way.
So excited. So now we live in a world where ebooks are hugely increasing in popularity and largely displacing physical books in certain market segments. Obviously, a pop-up book is in certain ways immune to competition from the Kindle or the Nook, but is it really? I mean, do you see digital publishing at all as a threat to your art form? And if so, is there anything you can do about that?
You know, that's a very, very good question. And everybody in publishing, from, you know, the publisher on high who's the head of the company to, you know, the lowliest editor or, you know, jacket designer, book designer is asking those same kind of questions. And from a pop-up standpoint, you know, I've had a couple booksellers say to me, because of course I have a very close relationship with booksellers because it's those people who are putting my books into your hands or other people's hands. And I've asked them that question. And, you know, they've said to me, no, there's always going to be a place for pop-up books. There is an inherent magic in turning a page and seeing something unexpected occur. And that is really a great point. Whether somebody is, you know, 5 or 85, it's still the same response. But I think to think that ebooks are not going to have an impact on children's books in general is naive. And, at this point, everything I hear from apps and ebooks in terms of children's books is that a lot of it is used for marketing at this point and not really from a book point of view, because I think a lot of parents feel guilty about putting an ebook in front of a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old. There's still hesitation. I don't have kids, but if I did have kids, I would not put that in their hands at that age. I would want to share a book with them, the turning of the paper, the going back. And so I think that ebook, I guess I sort of visualize it like, a big kitchen table. Okay, so there's this big table, round table, that is publishing in general. For years and years and years until the 1700s, it was all, academia, and then there were some fiction books. And then the 1700s, they had to make room at the table for children's books. And then, at the turn of the century to the 1900s, they had to make room for pop-up books. So, so you have to keep adding chairs to that big kitchen table in terms of books and publishing. And now everyone's going to squeeze over and they have to make room for ebooks.
I think that's a great analogy. That's really insightful.
I don't think that in my lifetime, I don't know what, 500 years from now, but I don't think that in my lifetime, electronic books are going to consume the whole kitchen table. I just don't see that happening. And we'll see if that's true. And I hope that doesn't happen, just for the fact that all the ebooks need electricity. That reason alone, makes me hope that's not the case. But I guess
no. As I can relate, books will very much take over the kitchen table and the kitchen floor and all the other places. So, yeah, there's definitely a mystery and that kids have with the physical books that's not there with the electronic books. So it's good to see.
Yeah. I think so, definitely.
So you talked about the books existing in 4-dimensional space, since each scene is since each scene in a book animates as it opens. Not to mention all the little whirly gigs and doodads you find around each scene. It's amazing. And in a way, it turns the experience of a book into a process of discovery in a really unique way. Are there any special considerations you keep in mind with regard to the motion of a page as it opens? And do you use the motion to improve the storytelling?
Well, I think I mentioned early on that sometimes when I'm trying to design something in my mind, it's sort of like a movie. When I was a boy, my mother was a dance teacher, Miss Judy. Everybody went to Miss Judy's dance school, and so and she put on recitals, and we would paint these big sets with these day glow color, and it was a big kind of it was a theatrical event. You know what I mean? There was like a beginning, and there was a middle, and there was an end. But not just in words, and not just in pictures, but there was like in movement. And I think that greatly influenced me in terms of the work that I do now in terms of motion. I'm not really interested in pop-up books that are just go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. I'm a little more interested, if I can, in making a world happen, like you would if you were, seeing something happen on stage. You can sort of just, it doesn't matter that there's wings and that there's lights overhead and everything. There's something happening on stage.
That's so interesting. And you were saying earlier something about insecurities and that made me think of stage fright and stage analogies. And now, you're talking about dancing, and it sounds like this is almost, in a way, a form of performance art for you.
It really is. That's the goal, it's supposed to be kind of exciting. And if it's 3-dimensional, you can make anything 2-dimensional exciting. I have friends who are awesome illustrators. I just look at something 2-dimensional, I'm like, that is amazing, and I could never do that in 1,000 years, and design as well. But when you're doing something 3-dimensional, where you've got an element of time in there, it has to be so much more. It does have to be a performance. It has to have quiet moments. It has to have private moments. It's got to have big moments. All those things I definitely have to think about as I'm making that story world, making that happen across those however many pages it is, 8 pages or little pages or whatever. So that I really have to consider that. If I'm turning the page into the same thing page after page, that's not interesting, because 2D picture books are not illustrated that way. You can't illustrate a 2D picture book with the same thing happening page after page. There has to be variety. Wow. There has to be magic,
So, to get some context with that, you just said 8 pages, and earlier you said 8 to 10 months. So is that like a month a page?
Well, with me, a lot of my books, my pop-up books, there's the main page, but then there's little pop-ups on the side. And so including the little pop-ups, yeah, it can take that long.
Wow.
It depends on how well I'm designing it, and if things are successful or if I get caught on something, it's just like, this isn't working, and then I have to, finally find a solution for it. So that's pretty good. That's pretty round, yeah. That's a good number.
That is so inspirational in so many ways. It's just really, really amazing.
It truly is.
I'm really, I got to tell you, I'm lucky to be doing this because I don't know how to do anything else. So this is it.
Well, Robert, having you on the show has been even better than that time I filled my mouth with crayons and burped the alphabet. Thanks so much for being with us.
That's great. Thank you very much for having
great.
me.
And if you would like to send 5,000 reams of paper and a vat of Elmer's finest to EVDHQ, please address that to Adam.
Yes, he loves that stuff.
I do. I also love comments, and Engineer vs. Designer needs yours. Give us some feedback on engineervsdesigner.com. Insults welcome. You never know what good things might happen if you do that.
Oh, yeah. And if you desperately wish to see us in our own pop-up book, be sure to like us, +1 us, follow us, or whatever, as social media has also been correlated with becoming shallow, even two-dimensional.
Special thanks to intern Simon for editing the show this week.
We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers wouldn't have paper to sketch on.
And without designers, paper would only be used for cable bills and toilet rolls.
See ya.
We outie.
This guy's a muppet.